whatever Onward Tribe. Time for another Father War story. So just in case you missed a previous story, the first two officers I worked for in the United States military were the best officer I ever worked for and the worst officer I ever worked for. And the best officer we called Father War. That was the nickname we gave to him, which, I mean, when I get truly old and gray, if somebody told me that the boys called me Father War, that'd be a pretty good day. I need to send him a letter to make sure he knows that. But he was incomparable in the way he managed the team. And one of the things that he did was just a tremendous amount of authenticity and sincerity and really being connected to the boys. Often the commanding officer lives out sort of in the corner office and is, you see him every once in a while. He's going to give a couple talks at, important times, but that might be the only, real interface you have with them. Not Father War. He was constantly in the mix with the troops. He knew everybody by name. People had tremendous affection for him, and he just developed a level of spirit in that command that I truly never saw its equal. One of those moments was one that I'll never forget very early in my career. This is pre 9/11, so, SEALs are wild. I mean, our guys are, a quarter of our guys, probably if they weren't doing that job, would be a villain, an enemy, a criminal in jail or doing something, going down the wrong path, and they kind of find a home with us. And it's actually, I think, one of the reasons we're so successful on the battlefield is some of our guys understand the enemy because it's not too far of a bridge or a gap to bridge between them and that bad, evil thing. They know it. They're willing to be immersed in that and have a sense of it. Obviously, in the military, there's a zero tolerance policy when it comes to drugs and alcohol in the terms of drinking and driving, DUIs, things like that. We had an operator of the team that everybody loved, but was an absolute wild man. I mean, I'm sure if you picked apart his background, you'd know why he was a drinker and a partier and always a high risk taker. But he had a DUI. The command had seen fit to not kick him out. That's not one of those policies where you're immediately out of the Navy. The command will make a decision. So before Father War had come there, he had a DUI. The command had retained him and probably, given him whatever disciplinary action he needed and, hey, correct it, toe the line. He gets another DUI. I remember showing up with the team on that Monday when this had happened over the weekend, and there was just a weight on the team. And then, I didn't know him well, but he was well thought of. He was a beloved member of the team, and everybody was like, well, it's over. There's no way you're going to get a second DUI and be retained in the Navy. You're probably going to get kicked out within the week. The week carried on, and then all of a sudden it was announced that the commanding officer was going to do what's called an open captain's mast. So when I say captain's mast, that's a term from Old Navy. I mean, back in the Napoleonic Wars of when the British were commanding the seas, mast is the primary, holder of the great sails on a great old wooden ship. And many of these traditions maintain to this day in the United States military. And a captain's mast is a legal proceeding. It is the commanding officer's legal ability to basically hold someone's career, and in this case, life, really in the balance and make decisions for both them and the Navy. So Father War calls for an open captain's mast. Almost all captain's masts are held in the commanding officer's office with the person in question, maybe a couple other key members of the team, but it's a closed session and that happens behind closed doors and gets taken care of. I'd never heard of an open captain mast, but what that meant was the entire team would be in ranks and present for those proceedings. He goes so far also to say, and it will be in dress uniform. So everybody has to have their finest uniform. I wish I could picture in my head if it was whites or blues. I think it was blues because I know it was like an overcast, heavy day. But we're all in our dress uniform. And we actually, the way he had set up the room, we have a huge room that could sit probably 200 people as our main briefing room. All the chairs, everything had been removed from that room. So just think of almost like a high school gymnasium, totally open, but tight, low ceilings, tight walls, not a big space, just big enough to carry a lot of people. And the commanding officer basically set up himself, the podium, in the middle of the room. So you'd think if you were presenting or talking, the podium would be on one end of the room, looking out at the whole command with the member in question kind of facing the podium almost as if they were looking up at a judge. The podium was in the middle of the room. So I remember as we all came in, the command master chief, his partner in crime, the commanding officers, gets us all in ranks behind the podium, behind the commanding officer. So all of the SEAL team is standing in ranks with the commanding officer in front of him, facing what will be this single teammate who's going to come in and face the fire. I mean, all of us are just like, wow. I mean, not only is this guy about to get gunned down, he's going to do it with an entire team facing him. Sure enough, in comes the teammate. He's in full dress uniform. He's very emotional. He's standing in front of the commanding officer. They go through all the formalities of that ceremony. And as it gets towards the end, the commanding officer can make a decision right there. I mean, he could say, you are processed out of the Navy. He could put him in jail. He could put him on bread and water. He can reduce him in rate. It's unbelievable the power a commanding officer has in the United States Navy. But he's sitting there looking at this team member and he says, hey, do you have anything final to say? And you can tell the guy is very, very, ashamed of his behavior. He knew he'd let the team down, and he knew what was coming, and he was going to take his licks. And the commanding officer looks like he's about ready to give a decision. He says, before I make this decision, I think your peers should have a vote. So anyone that believes this teammate is still of value or worth saving, I'd like you to stand with him, if you are so moved and so inclined. It was dead silence. I've never been in a room other than probably a funeral that at moments had this level of silence. But sure enough, in a minute, whatever amount of time passed, a chief that had worked for this operator goes out in front of that team member and stands behind him. And then 1, 2, 3. By the time it was done, the entire team is now standing behind the guy with the DUI, facing the commanding officer. The commanding officer is now standing alone, facing the entire team. The operator that's in front of us all is now at a point where he can hardly stand because he has this support of the team. And I'll never forget, Father War's like, look, you turn around, look at this team. They have your back. It's incumbent on you to never make a mistake like this because you know what's at stake. They put their reputation on the line for you. You better hold your reputation on the line for them. He said, you're cleared. I mean, he probably gave him something, but he's like, you're cleared. I want you back at the team. Keep your focus. I know for a fact that guy stopped drinking. He's one of our absolute famous teammates. He's a Master Chief. He's had an unbelievable career. But you want to talk about leading from the front and making a team something that's way beyond the individual parts. That's how you do it as a leader. Ever onward.